Hey guys, this is Ms. A, and in this video, I'm going to go over the extended response rubric that is used to grade all extended response essays on our state exam. So in the first category of the rubric, we're focusing on the content and the analysis. So in content and analysis, we're really focusing on the extent or how much the essay conveys complex ideas and information clearly and accurately in order to support claims in an analysis of topics or texts. So we're basically looking at the overall ideas, the way that a student is actually exploring the essay prompt or the essay question, the way they're organizing their ideas, and the way they're expanding on those ideas. In order to get a 4 for this area, you have to clearly introduce the topic in a manner that is compelling, that's a key word, and follows logically from the task and purpose. You also have to demonstrate insightful analysis of the text. So let's talk about the first bullet point, the fact that you have to have an introduction that's compelling. What does that really mean for something to be compelling? All right, so compelling basically is just referring to having an engaging lead or a hook, something that's going to draw the reader in and make them want to keep reading. So we've done a lot of engaging leads in class. This is an example for the 2013 extended response prompt for the passage Beyond the Twilight Zone. Have you ever read a story that always leaves you at the edge of your seat? This is called suspense. Authors usually build suspense to engage the reader. All right, so this is a compelling opening. The student has chosen a question lead strategy, and it's a specific question that's related to what the essay prompt is asking you to write about. This particular task is to write about how the author uses suspense in the passage. All right, here's another one. Have you ever wondered how dangerous it would be to go rock climbing in a cave so dark you couldn't possibly see without a light? In the story, the author builds suspense in many ways. All right, so this is, again, an engaging lead. Instead of just immediately restating what the essay prompt is asking for, the student is starting with a question, asking the reader to put themselves into the situation that the character from the passage was facing. All right, now here, in the passage Beyond the Twilight Zone by Nikki McCormick, the author builds suspense throughout the story. This is not an engaging lead. What this student has done is they've just taken the actual essay prompt and started their essay by answering the question, restating and answering it. So it's basically starting with the thesis statement instead of a hook. So having an opening like this is probably just going to get you a 3 on the essay. All right, so the next part of the bullet point refers to insightful analysis. What does that really mean? Well, when you're being insightful, it basically means that you're showing a deep understanding of something. It's what we talk about in class when we talk about having deep thought. And when you analyze something, you're examining something, the elements or the structure. So it's really looking deeply, not just at the plot or the summary of key events, but really looking at the way those events are organized, the way ideas are developed, the types of author's craft that somebody's using. So this would look like this. For example, on line 59, Amy starts to talk about how exhilarating and frightening it is climbing out in the dark. All right, so that's our text evidence. And then the student shows a little analysis by saying, which starts to get us worried if anything bad happens to her. So that's analysis because here you can see the student is kind of interpreting the way the detail from the story is affecting the reader. So they're analyzing what the author did and connecting it to how it impacts the person reading it. Another way the author adds suspense to the passage is by saying how deep the drop is. On page 18, line 11, it says a 95-foot drop. When I or any other reader hears that, they would think the situation story is suspenseful. All right, so this is not the deepest analysis, What the student has started to do is kind of show a little bit of deep thought by talking about how it's affecting the reader. But this could definitely be elaborated on further and gone deeper into either the author's craft or exactly why the reader is feeling suspense in this moment. But this is definitely the beginnings of it. All right, she's stunned and has to take a moment to let it all in. Then stood on the foot loop, but suddenly there was no resistance. I was falling. This shows, right here is a signal word leading into elaboration and deep thought. This shows how she doesn't say, I tried to get up, but I fell, because that doesn't create suspense. This is really great example of insightful analysis and deep thought, because what this student has done is they've given an example of what the author could have written instead, and then basically explained how, well, if the author had written this instead of what they really wrote, it wouldn't be suspenseful. We aren't guessing about what happened to her. So again, we have a connection to how it's affecting the reader, which is an analysis and a connection between text evidence and the reader. Remember, whenever somebody writes something, they're writing it to a reader. So there has to be a connection. There has to be an interaction. All right, so that's what you have to do to get a 4. To get a 3, you can see from the bullet point that you're just clearly introducing the topic in a manner that follows from task and purpose. So there's no hook for a 3. And you're demonstrating great appropriate analysis of the text. So you're not getting very deep into it, but there is a little bit of elaboration. A 2 would introduce the topic in a manner that follows generally from the task and purpose. So the difference here is that for a 3, it's very clear what your thesis statement is. Here, your introduction is maybe a little unclear. Maybe you restate, but you don't actually answer the question. And a level 1 essay, the introduction is not following logically from the task and purpose. So if the essay is asking you to write about suspense, maybe in your introduction you only summarize what the passage was about. You don't really mention suspense or let the reader know what your actual points in your body paragraphs are going to be. To get a 0, you would have to demonstrate very little understanding of what the essay is about. All right, so let's move on to the next category, which is command of evidence. So here they're telling you what you have to do in terms of your body paragraphs and the text evidence that you use. To get a 4, you have to have relevant, well-chosen text evidence. Could be facts, definitions, details, quotes, or any other information and examples from the text. But more importantly, you have to sustain the use of varied, relevant evidence. So your evidence has to be relevant. It has to be peanut butter cup evidence. And you have to have a variety of evidence, which means 2 things. 1, it should be a combination of quotes and paraphrase details, not just one or the other. And for there to be a variety, it can't just be the same part of the story repeated throughout your body paragraphs. There has to be evidence that comes from maybe the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. If you're going to be talking in one body paragraph about a piece of evidence, in the next body paragraph, you should try to find a different piece of text evidence. Even if that first evidence could work in the second body, don't use it again. You always want to have multiple examples to help prove your thesis. Now, to get a 3, there would be relevant evidence, but it wouldn't be a variety. Maybe you just use quotes or you just paraphrase, or you're really just using 1 or 2 pieces of evidence and you're kind of repeating them. To get a 2, you partially develop the topic and you use some text evidence. There could be some irrelevant details that you include into the essay. And to get a 1, there's really very few text evidence. There might even be 0 text evidence in a 1-point essay. A 0 has absolutely nothing. Completely irrelevant and definitely no text evidence being used. Okay, so our next category is coherence, organization, and style. So what we're really talking about here is how well you've organized into paragraphs, how well you've developed your ideas using transition words and vocabulary, and your conclusion. So for 4, you have to have clear organization. If you write everything in all one paragraph, you cannot get a 4. You also have to have appropriate and varied transitions. So you want to use phrases like, for example, the author states, in conclusion, as you can see. You want to have a formal style, which means since it's an essay, you do not want to use personal pronouns. You don't want to say in this essay. You don't want to talk about your essay. You don't want to say I'm going to write. You don't want to start off by saying hello, my name is. We're not in the first grade, so we don't start like that. And you want to make sure that you're using formal language. So you want to avoid using any slang, speaking in a casual manner with casual vocabulary, or any kind of colloquial language. You want to have stylistically sophisticated language and domain-specific vocabulary. So try to use as much vocabulary from the text as possible. And think about using the words that we've been studying all year, any of our vocabulary words. That's definitely going to help ramp up your essay. And then finally, this is probably one of the least important in terms of a timed essay test, but it definitely does differentiate a 4 from a 3. That's your concluding statement. You want to make sure that in your conclusion, you restate your intro paragraph thesis and that you end in a compelling way. So have some kind of hook. Make sure you answer the so what question for your reader. If you run out of time and you leave your conclusion off, but you have every other element that would get your essay a 4, you will still get a 4 for your extended response. All right, so I just want to talk once a little bit more about using vocabulary. Again, we've had a big focus on vocabulary this year. So try to keep in mind a lot of those words, and if it's appropriate for the particular passage and essay you're writing, try to use them. Instead of saying confused, try to say confounded. Instead of sadness, try to say melancholy. Try to say ponderous instead of heavy and massive, or penchant instead of saying strong liking. Here's some examples of vocabulary that could be used in the Beyond the Twilight Zone essay. Here the student said this adds suspense because many contemporaneous things are happening. These 3 pieces of evidence from lines 62 to 71 all show how they contribute to the suspense. Contribute is probably the main word you'll be able to use in almost every essay. And then finally, using any specific ELA terminology like climax, rising action, connotation, author's tone, author's perspective. Those are all the types of words that your scorers are going to be looking for. All right, and then finally, we just have the conventions criteria, which is referring to your grammar, your usage, capitalization, punctuation, and spelling. For a 4, you have to have grade appropriate use of conventions. There needs to be very few errors. It has to be very easy and fluent to read a level 4 essay. A level 3 essay has occasional errors, but they don't hinder comprehension, meaning when you hinder something, you're stopping it. So the errors in a level 3 essay are not stopping somebody from understanding or comprehending what you wrote. In a level 2 essay, there are some errors, and there may be parts of your essay where it's actually kind of hard to understand what you're trying to say because of your mistakes. A level 1 would have so many errors that there's multiple places where the person reading it doesn't know what you're trying to say. Okay, so overall, to get a level 4, the essay has to have a hook, a strong thesis that makes a claim and that restates and answers the essay prompt. Your body paragraphs have to be organized. Each body paragraph has a clear topic sentence. Uses a variety of transition words to link ideas. It includes peanut butter cup evidence. If there is chocolate bar evidence, that chocolate bar evidence is elaborated on to help make it stronger. It uses a variety of evidence, not just evidence that repeats the same thing over and over. It shows deep thought about the text through elaboration, explanation, and/or inference. It uses sophisticated vocabulary. It may have a conclusion that restates the thesis and leaves the reader thinking, and the conventions are almost perfect. So I just want to remind everybody that copies of this rubric can be found in Google Drive, along with writing